Aloha! It's CreativeNameToStandOut again with another battle report. This time I'm bringing you a game between my Pyre Legion and an opponent's Khorne Bloodbound. We'll be playing a scenario out of the new AOS starter book. It's called Hold or Die. I will be the invader, while the Khorne army will be the custodians. This mission calls for the invader to have a third more models than their opponent. We thought that didn't make a lot of sense since models do have varying capabilities, and even though we're not going to be trying to take advantage of these rules, we decided it made more sense just to count the wounds. So I started out with a third more wounds than my opponent, and then I split my forces into two. A smaller portion, which constitutes about a third of my army, starts on the board in the center. A 9-inch bubble is their deployment zone. They need to stay alive. The objective of the custodians is to kill all of this starting force, while mine will be to destroy his entire force. I will have the rest of my army starting in reserves, and I'll begin rolling for them to come on the board at the beginning of turn 2. These are my reinforcements, and they all come in at once. I activate Defiant Stand. As you can see there, it's a special rule that comes in this scenario. You can read it here. I also use the special command I can use in this scenario. I get two generals. One will be my BSB, and one will be the general with the reinforcements, and they can each give out all-out defense, which means as long as I don't move, consolidate, or charge with the unit that I give it to, they can re-roll armor saves. So this is where I start out. I go ahead and take the first turn, so I can activate those two abilities. And then that's it. So here's an overview of the board. We look over to see my opponent's next turn. He doesn't activate any command. I think he gives out Inspiring Presence to the Blood Reavers. Then he runs, and we go back to my turn, where you can see I have reinforcements now. As a side note, I'll be keeping track of the number of models that we have on the board there below the turn counter. So after reinforcements, I take a shot, of course, with Kekus at his Blood Secretary, but I do miss, and we move into the charge phase. So we look at his battle line, and the living battering rams, shock troops that they are, the Wrathmongers, are definitely the #1 threat to this one defensive unit I'm trying to protect. So what I want to do is eliminate them as quickly as possible, so I send my Dragon Ogres into them. Now this ends up being a big miscalculation, because even though I want to go in there and kind of surgically extirpate them out of the battle line, they're situated in the center of the battle line. So I do not consider, maybe I just forget, but I feel like I constantly know that this is a rule, but I just don't consider the consequences of it. That when you get within 3 inches of another unit, you're technically involved in a combat with them, which will allow them to consolidate and contribute to that combat. So by sending my Dragon Ogres into the center here to destroy these Wrathmongers, I pretty much end up finding his entire battle line. The only thing that's going to save me here is that he's going to spare me the Blood Warriors, because I didn't know this at the time. He was looking to move them out, but he didn't consider the fact that he was 3 inches away from my Dragon Ogres, so the only way to move them out would be to retreat, which wouldn't allow him to charge. So this will kind of prevent him from being the most efficient with them by going ahead and attacking in this turn, but when he moves on to the next turn, he'll realize what he did wrong and go ahead and do what he needs to do. As you can see, it took him until the end of his second turn to kill off the rest of those Dragon Ogres, and I do very superficial damage to both of his units. I then go to Magic, cast Bolt to Change, kill off 2 Blood Reavers, but was unable to turn either one into a spawn. That would have been terrific. I was able to get a spawn on the board, and then we move into my movement and charge phase. I only half learned from my last mistake. I didn't charge the center of his army, so that's progress. But I could have approached these Blood Warriors better with these Inch Warriors. Approached from an angle and then charged. That way I was only engaged with the Blood Secretary and the Blood Warriors. Unfortunately, I just moved forward and then charged, and I unnecessarily engaged the Wrathmongers also. So recognizing this is a losing fight, I try to assassinate the Blood Secretary, but fail in that. And now that I'm completely outmatched, I'm just going to try to blunt these 2 units as much as possible as I can. His Blood Reavers in his turn move up to engage this important unit finally. He charges in there, but I have a pretty good defensive position, and with the rerolling my armor saves, I come out unscathed and kill a lot of his Blood Reavers. The other combat goes pretty much how you would expect. Thankfully enough, I just don't have to take battle shock tests, or they'd be gone for sure. We go into my next turn, and I throw on the all-out defense rule on both the units from the respective generals, and I try to cast Arcane Shield, but his banner, when it's planted in the ground, makes me reroll successful castings, and at the second time I tried to cast it, I fail it, so that was too bad. We go into combat. I choose the Blood Reaver combat first, and sure enough, I kill them all with some help from the battle shock tests. And then we go over to the top combat, and I almost make it, but the last two guys do bite the dust. So here come the heavy hitters, and yeah, my reinforcements didn't really blunt those guys at all. So these two units are going to easily make it into combat, but both myself and my opponent were very surprised to see how sturdy this Chaos unit was behind a wall, able to reroll armor saves. Now, I did lose two of my warriors right away because the Wrathmongers made it around the wall, so I didn't get the bonus to my armor save. But then I struck back and I did quite a few wounds. I think more than he will end up doing to me, and when his Blood Warriors did attack, I did get the bonus for my armor save against them, and I ended up not losing any more of my warriors. So this was pretty shocking. My opponent realized that these two units on their own was probably not going to be enough to dislodge this last unit, and he is going to have to bring his heroes in to help finish the job. The Secutor picks up his BSB and runs into this combat to help his brothers out, while the Stoker hunts down my Sorcerer. The Secutor picks up a little bit of slack from the failures of his two units, but it's not quite enough of the impact we were thinking was going to happen, and I again am still whittling down his two other units. Meanwhile, both the Sorcerer, well, he only has one attack, but the Stoker definitely whiffs, and I just don't do anything with the measly attacks from my Sorcerer Lord. We go into my next turn. I begin with a magical blast to the Stoker's face and do 3 wounds, so things are looking kind of up there. I finish off his Wrathmongers, and then the whole not being able to move in exchange for rerolling my armor saves becomes more of a hindrance than a boon, but I still need it. So I think it's going to end up ending this way no matter what, whether I give up my rerolls in order to bring more attacks to bear. I can't, with the amount of guys left I have, deal with a 3+ armor save character. So eventually he kills off my Sorcerer Lord, brings down the Blood Stoker, who promptly gets killed because he only had 1 wound left, and we just kind of drag it out, fight until at the end he decides to engage my BSB, who couldn't move this entire game because I planted the banner in the ground and said I want to use the Defiant Stand. He moves over there and eventually kills him too. And that leaves him with just his Blood Secutor and 1 Blood Warrior, but that's enough to win. So that was a terrific game. I really, really enjoyed it. It did get a little monotonous there at the end when we were just waiting for him to finish off my units. But I mean, that was probably the simplest scenario, and I really, really enjoyed it. My opponent didn't even have to kill my entire army to win, but he took the time to go ahead and do that just to show how good of a player he was. So I really enjoyed playing him. This is a new player in my area, so it's great again to get another game against a new face. I'm really excited about what Age of Sigmar is bringing to the local area. So what did we learn? Don't charge the center of people's armies, especially when those armies have lots of synergies. That's just the death trap. That's the meat grinder that you're just going to feed free stuff to. I could have definitely done way better in this game had I placed each of these units, the warriors with the swords and the dragon ogres, on each of the flanks of his army. I would have pulled him apart. I would have weakened his forces to engage the center. Sure, the Wrathmongers probably would have ran in there into the center, but just them on their own, especially now that we get to see how tough my army was with the ability to reroll armor saves, probably would have lasted there for a while, allowing me to maybe break one of his flanks and then come assist that central unit. For those of you looking for maybe some tactical aspects of the game to maybe champion, if you look at this game and I say I did deploy better than I chose to with my reinforcements and then attacked each of the flanks of this army, whereas in 8th edition you could flank a unit, and depending on if Steadfast was a factor or not, maybe spelt the doom for that specific unit. It doesn't then lead to the idea in 8th edition that you would have destroyed the army had you flanked a unit. But in this game, had I flanked a unit and had I been successful in pulling this army apart, the whole army as a whole, since synergy is such a big part of the game now, would have been severely hampered and probably would not be able to execute its mission. So just something to think about, something to consider, I guess. But again, let me remind you, my position is that Age of Sigmar isn't more or less strategic or tactical than 8th edition. It's just, it does have some aspects to it that are tactical and strategic. I just don't believe 8th edition was as nuanced in its tactical and strategic facets as some people believe it is. So just trying to appeal to people who may feel that they've heard or think that maybe the game possesses none of that as compared to another version of the game. So again, something to consider, my little endorsement of the game. And as a final note, I've been on vacation for the last 2 weeks, so that's why there hasn't been a Warhammer wrap in the last little bit. So we'll be back to the consistent, usual routine going forward. So sorry about that, but that's the way things go sometimes. So thank you again. I appreciate everybody's likes, comments, and subscriptions, and hopefully I'll see you guys next week.